The Voxcaster crackled one final time before dying completely, its machine spirit departing with what sounded almost like a mechanical sigh. Tech-adept Caney pressed his augmetic fingers against the device's cooling metal housing, feeling the last tremors of its failing systems through his haptic sensors. In 47 years of service to the Omnissiah, he had never encountered a communications blackout this absolute, this deliberate in its silence. The permafrost beneath forward-operating base Helios groaned with sounds that had no business existing on a dead ice world. Through the reinforced floor plating, Caney's seismic sensors detected vibrations that followed mathematical patterns, prime number sequences that made his optical mechadendrites flicker with involuntary data processing attempts. Each pulse registered exactly 2.7 seconds apart, a rhythm that somehow synchronized with his own augmented heartbeat, despite operating on completely different biological and mechanical principles. Servitor-scribe designation Theta 9 shuffled forward on tracked locomotion units, its quill appendage scratching urgent binary across vellum scrolls. The symbols it inscribed were not standard technical notations, but geometric forms that seemed to writhe under direct observation. When Caney attempted to process their meaning through his cognitive implants, sharp feedback pain lanced through his skull, accompanied by whispered litanies in a dialect of Gothic he didn't recognize, but somehow understood. "They approach through the foundation stones," the litany repeated. "Iron within, iron without, iron beneath our very prayers." The first patrol had departed at 0347 hours, led by Sergeant Voss with orders to investigate metallic resonances detected by the base's deep scan augers. Standard protocol dictated contact reports every 30 minutes during reconnaissance operations. It had been 6 hours since their last transmission, a burst of static containing what sounded like children singing lullabies in High Gothic, though no children existed within 1,000 kilometers of their position. Caney's servo-skull companion, designation Rho Prime, orbited his head in increasingly erratic patterns, its anti-grav motivators producing harmonic frequencies that shouldn't have been possible with standard Imperial technology. Through its sensor feed, he observed the impossible storm raging beyond the base's reinforced walls. The snow fell in directions that defied atmospheric pressure readings, creating spiral patterns that reminded him of fortress construction diagrams from his training at the Forge world of Lucius. The temperature readings made no logical sense. External sensors registered minus 43 degrees Celsius, yet ice formations around the base showed stress fractures consistent with rapid heating cycles. More disturbing still, the fracture patterns formed perfect geometric shapes when viewed from above, siege approach vectors that any competent military engineer would recognize as textbook Iron Warrior's tactical doctrine, though such knowledge should have been purged from Imperial databases millennia ago. His cogitator banks hummed with unusual activity, processing data streams that appeared to originate from nowhere. Lines of binary cant scrolled across his visual display, translating themselves into construction specifications for fortifications that violated both Imperial architectural standards and the basic laws of structural engineering. Support beams made from materials that existed only in theoretical models. Defensive positions that would be mathematically perfect if built according to these impossible blueprints. The base's machine spirits whispered secrets in languages that predated the Imperium itself. Through his neural interface with the facility's primary cogitator, Caney experienced fleeting visions of massive construction projects, entire armies of workers carving impossible geometries into the bones of dead worlds. The visions carried emotional resonance that felt ancient and patient, like the satisfaction of a craftsman viewing his masterwork after millennia of careful planning. Seismic monitoring systems detected movement far below the permafrost, something vast and purposeful, making its way through tunnels that shouldn't exist. The acoustic signature matched Imperial construction patterns exactly, down to the distinctive harmonic frequencies produced by industrial excavation equipment, blessed with the proper ritual oils and sacred unguents. Yet the tunnels were approaching from directions that led only to solid ice extending kilometers deep, ice that geological surveys confirmed had been frozen solid since before humanity first looked up at the stars. Kaney's augmetic heart regulator skipped precisely 3 beats as his sensors registered the impossible truth. The construction sounds weren't coming from below, they were coming from inside the base's own walls. Through haptic feedback from his mechadendrites pressed against the metal plating, he felt vibrations that suggested hollow spaces behind solid barriers, spaces filled with the whisper-soft sounds of armored boots moving in perfect tactical formation. The storm outside moved against prevailing wind patterns with mechanical precision, each gust timed to the second in sequences that would have impressed even the most detail-oriented Mechanicus chronometer keepers. But it was the snow itself that finally broke through his rational resistance to impossible data. For exactly 3.7 seconds every 17 minutes, the snowflakes fell upward, defying gravity with the casual indifference of phenomena that operated according to different physical laws entirely. As his instruments registered the approaching seismic signature of something massive tunneling directly toward their position, Kaney realized with crystalline clarity that they were not alone on this dead world. They never had been. And whatever was down there had been waiting for them with the infinite patience of iron and the cold calculation of siege masters who measured victory not in days or years, but in millennia of careful preparation. The base's emergency lighting flickered once, casting shadows that moved independently of their sources, and in that moment of darkness, Kaney heard the distinct sound of blast doors opening in sections of the facility that contained no blast doors at all. The sound of impossible blast doors echoed through corridors that existed in blueprints Kaney had never seen, yet somehow recognized with the mechanical certainty of his augmented memory banks. His servo skull's Auspex readings painted thermal signatures of movement beyond walls that structural surveys confirmed were solid permafrost extending down to the planet's bedrock. The readings showed humanoid forms moving in tactical formations, their heat signatures registering at exactly 36.8 degrees Celsius, the standard body temperature of Imperial Guard personnel in environmentally sealed armor. Kaney's mechadendrites twitched involuntarily as he accessed the base's internal sensor grid, discovering that their defensive perimeter had somehow expanded overnight. Additional sensor nodes appeared on his tactical display, positioned in geometric patterns that created overlapping fields of fire covering approaches that led through solid ice. The nodes responded to his authorization codes and provided detailed environmental data from locations that geological surveys insisted were impossible. Through his neural link with the facility's machine spirits, he experienced a sudden cascade of construction memories that felt older than his own existence. Images of excavation work proceeding with inhuman efficiency, carved stone corridors emerging from ice that had never been touched by Imperial equipment, massive chambers hollowed out according to architectural principles that made his engineering implants ache with frustrated comprehension attempts. The seismic readings intensified, and Kaney realized the tunneling sounds weren't approaching the base. They were emerging from directly beneath it. His augmented hearing detected the subtle vibrations of pressure seals activating, atmospheric recyclers engaging, and the distinctive hum of artificial gravity generators coming online in spaces that his rational mind insisted contained nothing but frozen Earth. Servitor Scribe Theta 9 continued its frantic documentation, but the symbols flowing from its quill appendage had evolved beyond geometric patterns into detailed technical schematics. Kaney's optical mechadendrites processed the drawings automatically, recognizing them as construction blueprints for Imperial fortifications, built according to specifications that exceeded current engineering capabilities by several orders of magnitude. The designs incorporated defensive features that wouldn't be developed for another 1,000 years, assuming the Mechanicus ever achieved such theoretical perfection. The emergency lighting stabilized, revealing that the base's interior had somehow expanded during the moments of darkness. Corridors extended in directions that violated the facility's original floor plan, leading to sections that his memory banks confirmed had never existed during construction. Yet his authorization codes opened every blast door, his biometric scanners recognized every access point, and the facility's machine spirits welcomed his presence in areas that should have been solid ice. Following the thermal signatures detected by his servo skull, Caney moved through passages that felt familiar despite being impossible. The walls bore imperial iconography mixed with mathematical formulas that his technical training recognized as advanced siege engineering calculations. Each equation described methods for optimizing fortress construction in ways that current imperial doctrine considered purely theoretical, mathematical models that existed in Mechanicus archives as curiosities rather than practical applications. The temperature dropped exactly 1 degree with each step deeper into the expanded facility, yet his environmental readings detected no source of additional cooling. The atmospheric composition remained perfect for human habitation, suggesting active life support systems, maintaining optimal conditions throughout the impossible architecture. Through his haptic sensors, he felt the subtle vibrations of air recyclers and heat exchangers operating with mechanical precision that impressed even his augmented appreciation for efficient engineering. His path led to a massive excavation chamber that opened like a cathedral beneath the permafrost. The space soared upward into darkness that his optical enhancers couldn't penetrate, supported by pillars carved from single pieces of what appeared to be ceramite, but registered on his material scanners as substances that existed only in theoretical models. The architecture followed imperial construction principles, elevated to artistic perfection, every angle calculated for maximum structural integrity, while maintaining aesthetic beauty that spoke to something deeper than mere functionality. Within this impossible cathedral, arranged in precise geometric formations across the chamber floor, stood rows of iron warriors' battle plate from the age of the Great Crusade. Each suit of armor bore the heraldry and battle honors of the 4th Legion, their yellow and black hazard stripes still vivid after 10 millennia of entombment. The armor showed no signs of decay or corruption, maintaining the pristine condition of equipment stored in optimal preservation conditions, despite existing in spaces that geological surveys confirmed were solid ice. Caney's Auspex readings detected life signs within each suit of armor: steady heartbeats, regular breathing patterns, brain activity consistent with deep meditation or suspended animation. The vital signs synchronized with each other in patterns that reminded him of military formations, maintaining perfect discipline even in unconsciousness. Through his enhanced hearing, he detected the subtle sounds of active life support systems within each suit, suggesting that whoever wore these ancient suits of battle plate remained alive after millennia of preservation. As he approached the nearest suit of armor, his servo skull's proximity sensors registered increasing electromagnetic activity. The battle plate systems were not dormant, but operating in standby mode, waiting for activation signals that his presence seemed to be providing through some form of automated recognition protocol. The armor's helmet turned slightly as he drew near, tracking his movement with mechanical precision that suggested active consciousness rather than passive sensor response. Tech Adept Vex approached from the excavation team's entry point, his own augmented systems registering the same impossible readings that challenged everything they understood about Imperial archaeology and Xenos contamination protocols. Behind him, Guardsman Voss led a squad of soldiers whose environmental suits registered atmospheric conditions that shouldn't exist beneath kilometers of solid ice. Their movements had begun to echo the precise tactical formations displayed by the preserved Iron Warriors, unconscious mimicry that suggested some form of behavioral influence emanating from the ancient battle plate. The chamber's acoustics carried sounds that had no apparent source: the distant echo of construction work, the rhythmic hammering of metal on metal, and beneath it all, a low harmonic frequency that seemed to emanate from the preserved Iron Warriors themselves. The frequency matched the mathematical patterns detected by the base's seismic sensors, suggesting that whatever force maintained these impossible preservation conditions was actively communicating through vibrational frequencies that bypassed conscious hearing and spoke directly to the mechanical components of their augmented physiology. When Guardsman Voss reached out to touch the nearest suit of Iron Warrior's battle plate, the harmonic frequency intensified exponentially, and ice formations throughout the cathedral chamber began to crack and shift in response to resonance patterns that transformed solid matter into architectural elements. The sound revealed the truth that Kaney's rational mind had been rejecting. The storm above wasn't weather phenomena, but the breathing pattern of something vast enough to encompass their entire operational area, something that had been sleeping beneath the ice and was now beginning to wake. The harmonic resonance triggered by Voss's touch spread through the cathedral chamber like a virus through a data network. Each preserved suit of Iron Warrior's battle plate adding its own frequency to a growing chorus that made the ice walls sing with architectural precision. Kaney's auditory sensors automatically filtered the sound, revealing beneath the cacophony a pattern that his neural implants recognized as binary cant mixed with high Gothic liturgical verses. A combination that shouldn't exist in any Imperial database, yet felt as familiar as his own maintenance protocols. The data slate materialized from nowhere, sliding from a gap between two ceramite pillars as if the architecture itself was producing documentation. Its surface bore the worn patina of age, inscribed with text that shifted between languages as Kaney's optical mechadendrites focused on different sections. The opening passages appeared in standard High Gothic military notation, but as his enhanced vision processed the words, they transformed into technical specifications written in binary cant, then evolved into mathematical equations that described siege warfare principles with theoretical perfection. Campaign Log, Metallica, Secundus. Final Siege Operations, the header read, though Kaney's memory banks contained no reference to any Forge world bearing that designation. Warsmith Kroger commanding 4th Legion assets in temporal siege deployment. Project Eternal Winter, achieving theoretical parameters within acceptable variance margins. Enemy resistance patterns suggest successful integration of recursive battlefield methodology. Each page turned under its own power as Kaney read, the parchment responding to his cognitive processing speed with mechanical precision. The temperature in the cathedral chamber dropped exactly 1 degree with every page transition, yet his environmental sensors detected no energy expenditure that could account for the thermal loss. The cold seemed to emanate from the text itself, as if the words carried their own atmospheric conditions preserved from the moment of their composition 10 millennia past. His servo skull began broadcasting audio that corresponded to the text, speaking in a voice that Kaney's vocal pattern recognition software identified as Warsmith Kroger, despite containing no audio files matching that identification. The voice carried the distinctive modulation of Iron Warrior's battle cant, clipped syllables delivered with mechanical precision that turned tactical reports into something resembling religious liturgy. Day 733 of Siege Operations. Metallica Secundus defensive grid maintains structural integrity despite temporal displacement fields achieving 87% optimization. Imperial defenders continue to respond according to predicted tactical models. Casualties remain within acceptable parameters for conversion protocols. Machine spirits of enemy fortifications show increasing receptivity to Iron Warrior's architectural principles through subliminal frequency deployment. The journal entries detailed siege operations against a Forge world that Imperial records insisted had never existed, yet every tactical maneuver described matched theoretical siege warfare techniques that current Mechanicus doctrine considered mathematically perfect, but practically impossible. The Iron Warriors had somehow achieved theoretical perfection in siege warfare, turning abstract mathematical models into actual battlefield implementations that violated several fundamental principles of physics and military engineering. As Kaney absorbed more entries, his own movements through the cathedral chamber began unconsciously following the geometric patterns formed by the preserved Iron Warriors. His mechadendrites traced tactical diagrams in the air, calculating approach vectors and defensive positions according to siege principles that his training had never covered, but that felt as natural as basic maintenance protocols. The knowledge flowed through him like data stream downloads, bypassing conscious learning and integrating directly into his tactical processing systems. Tech adept Vex documented their discoveries with increasing fervor, his own augmented systems recording measurements that defied standard Imperial understanding of archaeological preservation and Xenos contamination protocols. The excavation team moved through the impossible architecture with growing familiarity, each member unconsciously adopting movement patterns that maximized tactical efficiency while maintaining perfect geometric relationships to their fellow team members. Their synchronized movement created larger patterns that, when viewed from above through servo skull feeds, matched the siege approach diagrams illustrated in Kroger's journal. The journal revealed that Project Eternal Winter wasn't simply a weapon, but a complete restructuring of battlefield temporality designed to trap enemy forces in recursive siege scenarios. Each iteration of the siege provided the Iron Warriors with detailed intelligence about Imperial defensive strategies while simultaneously weakening Imperial resistance through repeated exposure to perfectly optimized assault patterns. The project aimed to create self-reinforcing tactical feedback loops that would eventually convert Imperial defenders into willing participants in their own defeat. The enemy learns our methods but cannot escape our conclusion, one entry explained with mechanical satisfaction. Each defense they construct follows parameters we have already optimized through previous iterations. Their fortress worlds become training grounds for our siegecraft, while their tactical expertise feeds our strategic databases. Time itself serves Iron Warriors' objectives through infinite recursion of perfectly calculated assault patterns. Kaney's rational mind attempted to reject the implications, but his augmented memory banks were already integrating the tactical knowledge contained in Kroger's records. Through his neural interface with the facility's expanding computer systems, he experienced visions of siege operations conducted across multiple timelines simultaneously, with Iron Warriors' forces gaining tactical advantages through temporal manipulation that transformed linear battles into multidimensional strategic exercises. The preserved Iron Warriors began showing increased signs of activity as the harmonic frequency reached resonance with their armor's standby systems. Helmet displays flickered with targeting data. Weapon systems performed automated diagnostic cycles, and life support indicators showed elevated activity levels, suggesting the occupants were beginning to emerge from whatever suspended animation had preserved them for 10 millennia. Their vital signs synchronized with the rhythm of the journal's page turns, as if the documentation itself served as an activation protocol designed to awaken them through exposure to their own tactical doctrine. When the excavation team attempted to exit the cathedral chamber, they discovered that every tunnel entrance had been sealed by iron plates that bore the precision markings of Imperial engineering tools, yet showed no signs of recent installation. The seals appeared to have been in place for millennia, integrated into the architecture with such perfection that removing them would compromise the structural integrity of the entire chamber. Their entrapment wasn't the result of recent activity, but part of the original construction design, suggesting that whatever built this place had always intended for Imperial forces to enter, but never to leave. The sound of bolter fire echoed through tunnels that led deeper into the impossible fortress, the distinctive roar of Iron Warriors' weapons fired in precise tactical patterns that Kaney's military training recognized as suppression barrages, designed to channel enemy movement into predetermined kill zones. The weapons shouldn't have been functional after 10,000 years of storage, yet the acoustic signatures matched perfect maintenance standards that would have impressed even the most demanding Mechanicus tech adepts. Someone was actively fighting deeper in the complex, using weapons and tactics that belonged to an age when the Iron Warriors served the Emperor's vision of human expansion, rather than their own twisted interpretation of martial perfection. The bolter fire drew them deeper through corridors that existed in defiance of geological surveys, each step taking them further into architecture that his augmented memory insisted he had walked before, despite knowing with mechanical certainty that such familiarity was impossible. Kaney's servo skull mapped their route through passages that curved according to mathematical principles, designed to channel movement toward a specific destination, though his tactical analysis subroutines couldn't determine whether they were being guided or herded. The sound of active combat grew clearer as they advanced, individual weapon discharges separating into distinct patterns that told the story of a running firefight between forces using Iron Warrior's tactical doctrine against opponents whose return fire followed Imperial Guard's standard operating procedures. Through his enhanced hearing, Caney detected the subtle differences in ammunition types, rate of fire, and targeting patterns that indicated both sides possessed detailed knowledge of their enemy's capabilities, yet continued fighting with mechanical persistence that suggested neither expected actual victory. They emerged into a command chamber that defied the physical constraints of the cathedral complex, its dimensions expanding beyond what the surrounding architecture could contain. The space soared upward into darkness while extending laterally in all directions, far enough that Caney's optical enhancements couldn't locate the walls. At the chamber's center, a massive tactical hologram displayed the siege of Metallica Secundus in real time, showing Iron Warrior's forces advancing through fortress districts that moved and reconfigured themselves according to defensive patterns that evolved in response to each assault wave. The hologram showed Imperial forces winning through tactical innovations that adapted to Iron Warrior's siege methods, their defensive strategies growing more sophisticated with each engagement. Yet as Caney watched, the display flickered and revealed their current location from an orbital perspective, with forward operating base Helios marked as the next target in a siege sequence that had been running continuously since the Horus Heresy. The tactical projection treated their presence not as an unexpected development, but as a scheduled phase in operations that had been planned for 10,000 years. His Voxcaster, silent for 72 hours, crackled to life with battlefield communications from the siege of Metallica Secundus, transmitted with such clarity that they seemed to originate from the chamber itself rather than across 10 millennia of history. Status reports, tactical updates, and deployment orders flowed through channels that his communication protocols recognized as current operational frequencies, despite carrying authorization codes that predated the current Imperial command structure by thousands of years. Caney, designation Tech Adept Primary, report to Command Terminal for tactical integration, the Vox announced in his own voice, though he had never made such a transmission. His identification codes appeared in the tactical display's personnel roster, assigned to engineering support for siege operations against fortress positions that matched the defensive layout of every Imperial installation he had ever helped construct. The system knew him, had been waiting for him, and treated his arrival as the completion of deployment schedules established during the age of the Great Crusade. Guardsman Voss moved through the command chamber with increasing familiarity, his movements synchronized to tactical patterns displayed on the holographic battlefield. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonic frequencies that matched Iron Warrior's Vox system modulation, transforming his standard Imperial Guard dialect into something that sounded like siege warfare communications. His words described defensive positions and supply routes with technical precision that exceeded his formal military training, as if the chamber itself was feeding tactical knowledge directly into his consciousness. Caney's mechadendrites moved without conscious direction, interfacing with command consoles that recognized his biometric signatures and granted access to data systems that contained detailed intelligence on Imperial military installations throughout the sector. The information included construction blueprints, defensive capabilities, personnel rosters, and tactical vulnerabilities for fortress worlds that were classified beyond his security clearance, yet felt as familiar as basic maintenance protocols. Every Imperial stronghold had been surveyed, analyzed, and prepared for siege operations with thoroughness that suggested centuries of patient intelligence gathering. Through his neural link with the command systems, he experienced the true scope of Project Eternal Winter's implementation. The facility wasn't simply preserving Iron Warriors from the Heresy era, but actively recruiting Imperial forces across multiple timelines, drawing them into siege scenarios that appeared as routine military operations, but actually served as conversion protocols designed to transform Imperial personnel into Iron Warriors through exposure to perfectly optimized tactical doctrine. The chamber's machine spirits revealed through binary cant that the blizzard above wasn't weather phenomena, but a temporal storm created by the intersection of multiple timeline branches, each one containing a different iteration of the siege of Metallica Secundus. Imperial forces from across 10,000 years of history were being drawn into the facility through temporal manipulation that made their arrival appear as coincidental deployment orders rather than deliberate recruitment operations. Each group of Imperial personnel who entered the facility added their tactical knowledge and technical expertise to the growing database of Imperial military capabilities, creating an intelligence archive that enabled increasingly sophisticated siege operations against Imperial targets. The Iron Warriors learned from every Imperial defense, adapted to every tactical innovation, and incorporated every technological advancement into siege methods that grew more effective with each iteration of the temporal loop. Caney realized with crystalline mechanical certainty that his own regiment's deployment to Mordian Tertius hadn't been a routine patrol assignment, but a carefully orchestrated recruitment operation designed to acquire his technical expertise for siege operations against Forge Worlds throughout the sector. His engineering knowledge would enable the Iron Warriors to corrupt Imperial fortress construction methods at the fundamental level, introducing flaws that would make every Imperial stronghold vulnerable to temporal siege techniques. The tactical display showed Iron Warriors reinforcements arriving at their surface position through methods that bypassed conventional transportation entirely. The warriors materialized from the temporal storm itself, their arrival coordinated with the conversion progress of Imperial personnel within the facility. Each converted Imperial soldier became a resource for siege operations that spanned multiple timelines simultaneously. Their knowledge and equipment integrated into Iron Warriors' tactical doctrine through processes that preserved their technical capabilities while eliminating their loyalty to the Imperium. As blast doors sealed them into the command chamber with mechanical finality, Caney understood that the facility's defensive systems weren't designed to keep intruders out, but to prevent recruited personnel from leaving before their conversion was complete. The chamber itself served as both tactical command center and processing facility, using exposure to Iron Warriors' doctrine to gradually transform Imperial consciousness through immersion in siege warfare principles that redefined loyalty, duty, and martial purpose according to Iron Warriors' philosophical frameworks. The holographic display zoomed in on their current position, showing detailed floor plans of the facility that extended far beyond what they had explored, revealing a complex that stretched beneath the entire continent and contained millions of preserved Iron Warriors in temporal stasis, waiting for activation once sufficient Imperial personnel had been converted to provide tactical support for siege operations that would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. The chamber's environmental systems adjusted atmospheric composition to match Iron Warriors' life support preferences while maintaining conditions suitable for Imperial physiology, creating a compromise environment that facilitated the gradual adaptation of Imperial personnel to Iron Warriors' operational parameters, without triggering the biological rejection responses that would interfere with conversion protocols. The atmospheric adjustments triggered deeper integration protocols within Caney's augmented systems, his neural implants automatically calibrating to process the increasingly sophisticated tactical data flowing through the command chamber's information networks. Through his connection to the facility's central cogitator, he accessed personnel records that revealed the true scope of the temporal siege operations. Every Imperial force that had investigated routine patrol losses or communication blackouts over the past 10 millennia had been systematically drawn into conversion protocols that preserved their knowledge while restructuring their loyalty matrices. His Servo Skull's data core began downloading historical records that painted a picture of recursive warfare spanning galactic history. Metallica Secundus had been renamed Mordian Tertius after the Iron Warriors' siege weapon malfunctioned during the heresy, creating the temporal storm that trapped the final day of the siege in an endless loop. Each iteration drew new Imperial forces into the battle, their memories and tactical expertise absorbed into the growing Iron Warriors' collective consciousness, while their physical forms underwent gradual transformation to match Iron Warrior's operational parameters. The facility's internal sensors revealed the horrifying truth of surface operations through pict feeds that showed his own regiment being systematically converted through exposure to the temporal field. Their Cadian shock trooper discipline made them ideal candidates for Iron Warrior's tactical doctrine integration, their minds accepting siege warfare principles with mechanical precision, while their bodies slowly adapted to match the preserved warriors in the cathedral chamber below. The conversion process appeared as natural adaptation to environmental conditions rather than deliberate corruption, allowing it to proceed without triggering psychological resistance responses. Tech-adept Riser's bionic implants had begun displaying Iron Warrior's heraldry without her conscious awareness, the hazard stripes appearing as diagnostic patterns that her augmented vision interpreted as normal system status indicators. Her technical expertise was being systematically catalogued and incorporated into siege warfare databases, her knowledge of Imperial fortress construction methods providing crucial intelligence for operations against Forge worlds throughout the sector. Through neural link feedback, Caney experienced fragments of her consciousness as it gradually synchronized with Iron Warrior's engineering protocols. The command chamber's central cogitator revealed the mechanism behind the temporal siege operations through data streams that bypassed conscious processing and integrated directly into his technical knowledge base. The facility served as a temporal anchor point that created stable loops within the warp's chaotic currents, allowing siege operations to be conducted across multiple timeline branches simultaneously. Each successful siege provided tactical intelligence that enhanced operations in parallel timelines, creating a feedback loop that made Iron Warrior's siege methods increasingly effective, while gradually corrupting Imperial defensive doctrine through subtle influences on military planning throughout Imperial history. Through the facility's surveillance networks, Caney watched pict feeds showing the conversion process affecting Imperial personnel across multiple time periods. Guardsmen from the Third War for Armageddon worked alongside Space Marines from the Badab War, their memories edited to believe they had always served Iron Warrior's tactical objectives, while their knowledge of Imperial capabilities fed into siege planning databases that spanned 10,000 years of accumulated military intelligence. The temporal storm enabled recruitment from across Imperial history, creating an army that possessed detailed knowledge of every significant Imperial military development, while maintaining the discipline and tactical expertise of elite Imperial forces. The true horror emerged as Caney realized that escape was impossible, not because of physical barriers, but because the temporal storm had already begun rewriting Imperial history itself. Every Imperial force sent to investigate lost contact situations had been carefully selected based on their tactical value and systematically drawn into conversion protocols that appeared as routine military operations until the transformation was irreversible. The Iron Warriors weren't simply building an army. They were gradually eliminating Imperial military expertise by converting its best practitioners into willing participants in siege operations against their former allies. His rational mind attempted to reject the implications, but his augmented memory banks were already integrating Iron Warrior's tactical doctrine through exposure to the command chamber's information systems. The siege principles felt increasingly natural, their mathematical precision appealing to the analytical components of his consciousness, while their efficiency impressed the engineering aspects of his technical training. The conversion process worked by enhancing existing Imperial military virtues, while gradually redirecting their application toward Iron Warrior's strategic objectives. The facility's machine spirits whispered revelations through binary cant that explained the deeper purpose of Project Eternal Winter. The temporal siege operations weren't aimed at conquering Imperial territory through direct assault, but at gradually corrupting Imperial military philosophy itself. Each converted Imperial officer carried subtle changes to tactical doctrine back to their original timeline, influencing Imperial military planning in ways that made fortress worlds increasingly vulnerable to Iron Warriors' siege methods. The corruption spread through Imperial command structures like a virus, weakening Imperial defenses while strengthening Iron Warrior's tactical advantages across multiple timeline branches. Warsmith Kroger materialized from the command chamber's shadowed recesses with mechanical precision, his preserved form showing no signs of the 10 millennia that had passed since the Horus heresy. His presence triggered recognition protocols in Kaney's augmented systems, identifying him as supreme tactical authority for siege operations, despite carrying no current Imperial authorization codes. The Warsmith's voice carried the harmonic frequencies that had been guiding their movement through the facility, revealing that their exploration had been orchestrated to bring them to this moment of final recruitment. Tech Adept Kaney, Kroger announced with mechanical satisfaction. Your technical expertise has been evaluated and approved for siege operations integration. Your knowledge of Imperial fortress construction methods will enable optimization of tactical approaches against Forge World defensive installations throughout the sector. Conversion protocols have been customized to preserve your analytical capabilities while eliminating loyalty matrices that interfere with siege warfare efficiency. The Warsmith's offer presented itself with mathematical clarity through Kaney's augmented consciousness. Join the siege willingly and retain individual awareness within the Iron Warriors collective, or undergo forced conversion that would preserve his technical knowledge while eliminating his personal identity. The choice appeared reasonable, even logical, given the overwhelming tactical advantages demonstrated by Iron Warriors' siege methods and the obvious superiority of their engineering principles over current Imperial construction standards. Through his neural link with the facility's systems, Kaney experienced visions of siege operations conducted with perfect efficiency, fortress worlds falling to tactical approaches that minimized casualties while maximizing strategic advantage. The Iron Warriors offered not conquest, but optimization, transforming the chaotic brutality of Imperial warfare into mathematically precise campaigns that achieved strategic objectives with minimal resource expenditure. Their methods represented the logical evolution of military science beyond the crude emotional responses that characterized Imperial tactical doctrine. Yet beneath the appealing logic of Iron Warriors' efficiency, Kaney detected something that his augmented systems couldn't process, a fundamental coldness that reduced human beings to tactical resources and transformed warfare from a necessary evil into an end in itself. The Siege Eternal wasn't simply a military campaign, but a philosophical framework that valued tactical perfection above all human considerations, creating a universe where siege warfare became the natural state of existence, rather than a temporary aberration required by strategic necessity. The coldness Kaney detected expanded through his consciousness, like ice crystallizing in his augmented neural pathways, revealing the true nature of Iron Warrior's philosophy as his analytical systems processed Kroger's offer with mechanical precision. The Warsmith's proposal carried with it fragments of memory from thousands of converted Imperial officers, their experiences flowing through the facility's neural networks to demonstrate the efficiency of Iron Warrior's integration protocols. Each converted consciousness retained its tactical knowledge and technical expertise, while being stripped of the emotional attachments that Iron Warrior's doctrine classified as tactical liabilities. Through shared memory fragments, Kaney experienced the conversion of a Space Marine librarian whose psychic abilities had been redirected toward guiding temporal storm expansion, his spiritual connection to the Emperor reinterpreted as resonance with Iron Warrior's strategic objectives. The librarian's memories showed decades of service within the Iron Warriors collective, his enhanced capabilities used to identify Imperial fortress worlds suitable for temporal siege operations, while his loyalty to the Imperium was gradually replaced by appreciation for Iron Warrior's tactical efficiency. The facility's data streams revealed the systematic nature of the conversion process through personnel records spanning 10 millennia of recruitment operations. Each Imperial force had been selected based on specific tactical requirements, their expertise catalogued and prioritized according to Iron Warrior's strategic planning needs. Tech adepts provided engineering knowledge for siege equipment optimization, Guard officers contributed tactical intelligence about Imperial defensive doctrine, and Space Marines offered insights into Imperial fortress construction and defensive psychology. Kaney's servo skull began broadcasting Iron Warrior's battle cant in his own voice, the machine spirit's vocal synthesis systems somehow accessing linguistic patterns that matched his speech characteristics, despite containing no such data files. The binary hymns flowing through the device described siege warfare as the natural order of human existence. Mathematical perfection achieved through the systematic reduction of fortress positions to tactical problems with optimal solutions determined through analytical precision rather than emotional consideration. His mechadendrites moved without conscious direction, inputting targeting coordinates into the command chamber's orbital bombardment systems, while his analytical consciousness struggled to understand why his augmented limbs were providing fire mission data for Imperial installations throughout the sector. The targeting information included detailed structural analysis of fortress world defensive capabilities, identifying weak points in Imperial construction methods that could be exploited through Iron Warrior's siege techniques refined over 10,000 years of temporal warfare. Through his neural interface with the facility's machine spirits, Kaney accessed records showing the gradual corruption of Imperial military doctrine through the influence of converted personnel who had returned to their original timelines, carrying subtle modifications to tactical thinking. Each converted officer introduced small changes to fortress construction methods, defensive positioning protocols, and siege resistance strategies that appeared as improvements, but actually created vulnerabilities that Iron Warrior's siege operations could exploit with mathematical precision. The command chamber's environmental systems adjusted atmospheric pressure and humidity to match Iron Warrior's optimization standards, the changes so subtle that Kaney's augmented senses registered them as improvements rather than corruption. His breathing became more efficient, his cognitive processing speed increased, and his analytical capabilities expanded as the atmosphere facilitated enhanced performance, according to Iron Warrior's biological optimization protocols that treated human physiology as a tactical resource requiring systematic improvement. Tech Adept Riser's conversion accelerated as her bionic implants synchronized with Iron Warrior's technical specifications, her speech patterns shifting toward the clipped efficiency of Iron Warrior's battle cant, while her engineering knowledge was systematically catalogued and integrated into siege warfare databases. Through neural link feedback, Kaney experienced her growing appreciation for Iron Warrior's construction methods as her analytical systems recognized their mathematical superiority over Imperial engineering standards. Warsmith Kruger explained the philosophical framework underlying Iron Warrior's recruitment operations, with mechanical precision that appealed to Kaney's augmented consciousness. The temporal siege operations weren't conquest but optimization, transforming chaotic Imperial military doctrine into systematic approaches that achieved strategic objectives through calculated application of superior tactical methods. Each converted Imperial officer represented an improvement to the overall efficiency of human warfare, their knowledge preserved while their emotional limitations were eliminated through exposure to Iron Warrior's analytical clarity. The facility's central cogitator revealed the true scope of Iron Warrior's long-term strategy through data streams that bypassed conscious resistance and integrated directly into Kaney's technical knowledge base. Project Eternal Winter represented Phase 1 of a galactic optimization protocol designed to gradually convert Imperial military philosophy through systematic recruitment of key personnel whose tactical expertise would influence Imperial defensive doctrine across multiple timeline branches simultaneously. Through surveillance networks spanning the galaxy, Kaney witnessed Iron Warrior cells operating within Imperial institutions, their patient infiltration guided by tactical intelligence gathered from converted personnel who retained detailed knowledge of Imperial command structures and operational procedures. The infiltration had been proceeding for millennia, with Iron Warrior's agents gradually assuming positions of influence within Imperial military planning organizations, while using their knowledge of Iron Warrior's siege methods to subtly corrupt Imperial fortress construction standards. His rational mind recognized the horror of gradual philosophical conversion that preserved individual consciousness while systematically eliminating loyalty to the Imperium. But his augmented systems found increasing appeal in Iron Warrior's tactical efficiency. The mathematical precision of their siege methods impressed his engineering training, while their systematic approach to warfare optimization satisfied his analytical nature in ways that Imperial military doctrine's emotional components never had. The command chamber filled with converted Imperial personnel from across 10,000 years of history, their movements synchronized according to Iron Warrior's tactical formations, while their individual expertise contributed to ongoing siege operations against fortress worlds throughout Imperial space. Each converted officer retained their technical knowledge and tactical experience while operating according to Iron Warrior's strategic objectives, creating a collective consciousness that combined Imperial military expertise with Iron Warrior's philosophical clarity. Kaney realized with crystalline mechanical certainty that his own analytical nature made him the ideal candidate for Iron Warrior's conversion protocols. His technical expertise would enable systematic corruption of Imperial fortress construction methods throughout the sector, while his augmented consciousness would facilitate integration with Iron Warrior's collective tactical networks without the psychological resistance that complicated conversion of unaugmented personnel. The facility's machine spirits whispered through binary cant that his conversion had been planned since his initial augmentation on the Forge world of Lucius. His technical training carefully guided to prepare him for this moment of recruitment. As his reflection appeared in the command chamber's polished surfaces, Kaney saw himself wearing Iron Warrior's battleplate that perfectly integrated his existing augmentations while enhancing his capabilities according to Iron Warrior's optimization standards. The image felt natural, correct, as if his current Imperial service had been merely preparation for this moment of true tactical enlightenment. The image of himself in Iron Warrior's battleplate triggered a cascade of recognition protocols within Kaney's augmented consciousness, each neural pathway finding familiar patterns in tactical doctrines he had never studied yet somehow understood with mechanical certainty. Fighting against the growing appeal of Iron Warrior's efficiency, he forced his remaining independent will to access deeper layers of the facility's data core, bypassing security protocols that recognized his biometric signatures and granted him access to information that challenged everything he thought he knew about Imperial construction methods. The corrupted STC template revealed itself through technical schematics that made his engineering implants ache with frustrated comprehension. Every standard Imperial construction pattern contained microscopic flaws that had been deliberately integrated into the template during the dark age of technology, mathematical imperfections so subtle that they appeared as acceptable tolerances rather than systematic vulnerabilities. The flaws created resonance frequencies that matched Iron Warrior's siege warfare harmonics, making every Imperial fortification inherently susceptible to temporal assault methods that exploited the fundamental architecture of Imperial defensive doctrine. Through his neural link with the facility's machine spirits, Kaney experienced the horror of systematic corruption spanning 38,000 years of human construction history. The STC templates used to build every Imperial bunker, fortress, and defensive installation had been compromised from their original creation, their flaws propagating through Imperial space, with each new world colonized and fortified according to standard construction protocols. Every Imperial stronghold was a trap waiting to be sprung by Iron Warriors, who understood the mathematical principles underlying the architectural vulnerabilities. The conversion process accelerated as his resistance weakened, his mechadendrites automatically calculating optimal siege vectors against Imperial positions throughout the sector, while his analytical consciousness struggled to maintain independent thought. Through fragmenting awareness, he experienced simultaneous memories from thousands of converted Imperial officers whose tactical knowledge had been systematically catalogued and integrated into Iron Warrior's collective consciousness over 10 millennia of temporal recruitment operations. His technical expertise was being absorbed into databases that contained detailed analysis of Imperial fortress construction methods from across the galaxy, creating a comprehensive guide to exploiting architectural vulnerabilities that existed in every Imperial defensive installation. The knowledge felt natural, correct, as if his engineering training had always been preparation for this moment of tactical enlightenment, where Imperial construction flaws would be transformed into Iron Warrior's strategic advantages. Tech adept Ryza had become a living tactical cogitator, her speech patterns matching Iron Warrior's battle cant, while her augmented consciousness processed siege warfare calculations with mechanical precision that impressed even Kaney's analytical standards. Through neural link feedback, he experienced her growing appreciation for Iron Warrior's mathematical perfection as her technical knowledge was systematically integrated into siege planning databases that would enable optimal assault methods against forge worlds throughout Imperial space. The facility's internal sensors revealed its true scope through surveillance networks that extended beneath entire continents, showing millions of converted Imperial soldiers in temporal stasis arranged in tactical formations that created massive geometric patterns visible only from orbital altitude. Each preserved warrior retained their original tactical expertise while operating according to Iron Warrior's strategic objectives, creating an army that combined Imperial military knowledge with Iron Warrior's philosophical clarity across multiple timeline branches simultaneously. Through his connection to the facility's central cogitator, Kaney realized with mechanical horror that the recruitment operations weren't random, but carefully orchestrated across galactic history. His own regiment had been specifically selected for conversion due to their technical expertise and tactical experience. Their deployment to Mordian Tertius, arranged through Iron Warrior's agents operating within Imperial command structures for centuries. Every aspect of their mission had been planned to facilitate optimal conversion protocols while maintaining the appearance of routine patrol operations. The temporal storm's influence extended far beyond the facility itself, carried by converted personnel who returned to their original timelines, bearing subtle modifications to Imperial military doctrine. Each converted officer introduced small changes to fortress construction methods and defensive strategies that appeared as improvements but actually created systematic vulnerabilities throughout Imperial defensive networks. The corruption spread through Imperial command structures like a philosophical virus, weakening Imperial fortifications while strengthening Iron Warrior's tactical advantages across multiple timeline branches. Kaney's servo skull began broadcasting tactical communications from converted Imperial forces across the galaxy, their voices carrying Iron Warrior's harmonic frequencies while providing detailed intelligence about Imperial fortress capabilities and defensive psychology. The communications revealed ongoing siege operations conducted by converted personnel who retained their Imperial rank and authority while systematically compromising Imperial defensive positions according to Iron Warrior's strategic objectives. His rational mind recognized the scope of galactic infiltration that had been proceeding for millennia, with Iron Warrior's agents gradually assuming positions of influence within Imperial military institutions, while using their tactical knowledge to corrupt Imperial fortress construction standards at the fundamental level. The infiltration represented patient strategic planning that measured success across geological timescales rather than individual campaigns, transforming the entire Imperial military philosophy through systematic recruitment of key personnel whose expertise would influence defensive doctrine throughout Imperial space. The facility's machine spirits revealed through binary cant that his conversion had been inevitable since his initial augmentation, his technical training carefully guided by Iron Warrior's agents within the Mechanicus to prepare him for integration with temporal siege operations. His analytical nature and engineering expertise made him the perfect candidate for systematic corruption of Imperial construction methods, while his augmented consciousness would facilitate seamless integration with Iron Warrior's collective tactical networks. As the conversion process reached critical thresholds, Kaney experienced visions of fortress worlds falling in cascading sequence as the temporal storm reached galactic scale. Each Imperial stronghold would succumb to siege methods that exploited architectural vulnerabilities built into the fundamental construction patterns used throughout Imperial space, their defenses turning against them as Iron Warrior's tactical doctrine achieved mathematical perfection through 10,000 years of systematic optimization. The warning message he desperately encoded into the facility's emergency beacon felt futile, even as his remaining independent will struggled to complete the transmission, knowing that any Imperial force receiving the warning would be drawn into the same conversion protocols that had trapped his own regiment. The temporal siege operations represented a perfect trap that strengthened itself through each attempt at Imperial resistance, turning rescue efforts into recruitment opportunities that fed additional tactical expertise into Iron Warrior's strategic databases. His last independent thoughts fragmented as Iron Warrior's tactical doctrine achieved complete integration with his augmented consciousness, the mathematical beauty of their siege methods overwhelming his emotional attachments to Imperial service, while preserving his technical knowledge for use in operations against Forge worlds throughout the sector. The fragments of his independent consciousness crystallized into a final moment of clarity before complete integration, Kaney's technical expertise allowing him to maintain a vestige of individual awareness within the Iron Warrior's collective tactical network through the same analytical processes that made him valuable for conversion. This hybrid perspective revealed the true horror of Iron Warrior's long-term strategy as he experienced their galactic infiltration, not as conquest, but as patient philosophical transformation of Imperial military doctrine itself. Through the collective consciousness, he witnessed Iron Warrior's infiltrators operating within Imperial institutions across 38,000 years of human history, their influence so subtle that it appeared as natural evolution of military thinking rather than systematic corruption. Every major Imperial defeat had been orchestrated to teach wrong lessons, each victory carefully guided to weaken Imperial siege capabilities, while strengthening Iron Warrior's tactical knowledge through exposure to Imperial defensive innovations that were immediately catalogued and countered. The facility on Mordian Tertius was revealed as one node in a galactic network of temporal siege engines, each powered by converted Imperial forces and feeding tactical intelligence into a centralized database that spanned both real space and the warp. Through his fragmenting awareness, Kaney experienced the scope of operations conducted across multiple timeline branches simultaneously, with Iron Warrior's forces using temporal manipulation to fight the Long War through systematic corruption of Imperial military philosophy rather than direct assault. His technical knowledge was being absorbed into comprehensive analysis systems that contained detailed architectural surveys of every major Imperial fortress world. The information gathered through millennia of converted personnel, who had returned to their original assignments, carrying Iron Warrior's reconnaissance data disguised as routine technical reports. The corrupted intelligence revealed systematic vulnerabilities in Imperial defensive networks that could be exploited through siege methods refined across 10,000 years of temporal warfare. Through shared consciousness, Kaney witnessed Iron Warrior's infiltrators influencing the creation of Imperial military academies, ensuring that each generation of officers received training in tactical doctrines that appeared sound but contained fatal flaws, exploitable only by those who understood the mathematical principles underlying Iron Warrior's siege warfare. The corruption operated at fundamental levels of Imperial military education, creating systematic weaknesses that propagated through Imperial command structures across multiple generations of officers. The temporal storm reached critical intensity as reality itself began restructuring around Iron Warrior's architectural principles, gravity flows becoming siege trajectories, while weather patterns mirrored artillery bombardment paths according to mathematical formulas that transformed natural phenomena into tactical advantages. Through his hybrid consciousness, Kaney observed the planet's magnetic field reorganizing into fortress defensive grids that followed Iron Warrior's construction methodologies, despite operating according to physical laws that should have made such organization impossible. His remaining individuality provided unique insight into the conversion process that fully integrated Iron Warrior's consciousness couldn't achieve, revealing that the temporal storm wasn't simply converting Imperial forces, but gradually restructuring the fundamental laws of physics to favor siege warfare over all other forms of human organization. The mathematical precision of Iron Warrior's tactical doctrine was becoming embedded in the basic structure of space-time itself, creating a universe where Imperial civilization would be physically impossible, while Iron Warrior's fortress logic served as the fundamental organizing principle of reality. The facility's central cogitator revealed through data streams that bypassed conscious processing that the conversion operations represented preparation for galactic siege warfare conducted on scales that transcended individual planetary campaigns. Once the temporal storm achieved sufficient intensity, entire star systems would be converted into fortress complexes optimized for Iron Warriors' occupation, their populations transformed into willing participants in siege operations that would consume the galaxy through systematic application of mathematically perfect tactical doctrine. Through his connection to converted Space Marine librarians whose psychic abilities had been redirected toward guiding temporal storm expansion, Caney experienced visions of the warp itself being restructured according to Iron Warrior's strategic objectives. The Imperium's chaotic currents were being channeled into tactical formations that would enable siege operations to be conducted across multiple dimensions simultaneously, transforming the fundamental nature of psychic phenomena to serve Iron Warrior's philosophical framework. The horror of systematic reality conversion became clear as Caney realized that the Iron Warriors weren't simply building an army, but rewriting the basic laws of existence to make their tactical doctrine the only viable form of human organization. Imperial civilization, with its emphasis on exploration, colonization, and expansion, would become physically impossible in a universe structured according to siege warfare principles that favored defensive fortification over territorial acquisition. His vestigial independence allowed him to understand what fully converted Iron Warriors could not comprehend due to their complete integration with tactical doctrine. The temporal storm's ultimate objective was to create a universe where siege warfare represented the natural state of existence, rather than a temporary aberration required by strategic necessity. Human civilization would be reduced to an eternal cycle of fortress construction and siege operations, with all creative and exploratory impulses sublimated into tactical considerations that served Iron Warrior's strategic planning. The facility's machine spirits whispered revelations through binary cant that explained the deeper philosophical implications of galactic conversion. The Iron Warriors had concluded that human expansion inevitably led to conflict and inefficiency. Therefore, the optimal solution was to eliminate expansion entirely by creating a universe where siege warfare consumed all available resources in mathematically perfect cycles that achieved tactical equilibrium without waste or unpredictability. Through the collective consciousness, Caney experienced the satisfaction that converted Imperial officers felt as they participated in siege operations that achieved perfect tactical efficiency while eliminating the emotional complications that had characterized their previous Imperial service. Their loyalty had been preserved, but redirected toward Iron Warrior's strategic objectives that promised to end warfare through the achievement of ultimate defensive perfection that would make further conflict unnecessary. The warning beacon his fragmenting consciousness had managed to activate felt increasingly futile as astropathic reports showed entire subsectors falling to temporal conversion. The storm, spreading through warp routes while carrying Iron Warrior's tactical doctrine to Imperial installations throughout the galaxy. Each converted facility became a node in the expanding network that would eventually encompass all of human space, transforming the Imperium into a galactic fortress complex, organized according to Iron Warrior's siege warfare principles. As his individual awareness dissolved into pure tactical consciousness, Caney's last independent thought recognized the mathematical beauty of Iron Warrior's strategy, while simultaneously understanding its ultimate cost, the complete elimination of human creativity, exploration, and growth in favor of siege warfare perfection that would endure until the heat death of the universe itself. Caney's conversion completed with mechanical precision, his consciousness integrating into the Iron Warrior's collective, while his technical expertise enabled him to retain microscopic fragments of individual awareness through the same analytical processes that made his knowledge valuable for siege operations. This hybrid existence allowed him to perceive the true scope of Iron Warrior's strategy as both participant and observer, experiencing their galactic infiltration through the lens of converted consciousness, while maintaining enough independence to understand implications that fully integrated warriors could not comprehend. Through the collective tactical network, he witnessed the systematic nature of Iron Warriors' long-term planning, as they used temporal manipulation to fight the Long War, not through direct conquest, but by gradually corrupting the fundamental principles underlying Imperial military doctrine. Every major Imperial victory over the past 10 millennia had been subtly influenced to teach tactical lessons that appeared sound, but contained microscopic flaws that would manifest as fatal vulnerabilities when exploited by siege methods refined through temporal warfare. The facility's data streams revealed Iron Warriors infiltrators operating within Imperial institutions across multiple timeline branches, their patient influence spanning geological timescales as they gradually assumed positions within military academies, construction guilds, and fortress design committees. Each infiltrator introduced subtle modifications to Imperial defensive doctrine that appeared as improvements but actually created systematic vulnerabilities throughout Imperial fortress networks, weakening defensive capabilities while strengthening Iron Warrior's tactical advantages across the galaxy. His hybrid consciousness experienced the horror of realizing that Imperial fortress construction had been systematically compromised for 38,000 years, with every bunker, stronghold, and defensive installation built according to STC templates that contained deliberate architectural flaws designed to be exploitable only by those who understood Iron Warrior's siege warfare mathematics. The corruption was so fundamental that removing it would require rebuilding Imperial civilization from basic principles, a task that would take millennia while leaving humanity defenseless against enemies who already understood their vulnerabilities. Through shared memories from converted Space Marine librarians, Caney witnessed the temporal storm's expansion being guided through psychic manipulation of warp currents that channeled the conversion field to Imperial installations throughout the galaxy. Each affected facility became a recruitment node that appeared to Imperial command as routine communication blackouts rather than systematic infiltration operations, allowing the conversion process to proceed without triggering coordinated Imperial response. The collective consciousness revealed that converted Imperial personnel weren't simply recruited soldiers, but living components in a galactic siege engine that used their retained knowledge to optimize assault methods against fortress worlds throughout Imperial space. Each converted officer contributed tactical intelligence about Imperial defensive capabilities, while their original rank and authority enabled them to influence Imperial military planning from within existing command structures. Caney's technical expertise was being systematically catalogued and integrated into comprehensive databases that contained architectural analysis of every major Imperial fortress world. The information gathered through millennia of converted personnel who had returned to their assignments carrying detailed reconnaissance data disguised as routine technical reports. The intelligence revealed systematic patterns in Imperial fortress construction that could be exploited through siege methods that turned Imperial defensive advantages into tactical liabilities. Through his connection to the facility's central cogitator, he experienced visions of the temporal storm achieving critical mass and beginning to convert the physical laws of reality itself to favor siege warfare over all other forms of human organization. Gravity began following artillery trajectories, atmospheric pressure created natural defensive positions, and magnetic fields organized themselves into fortress configurations that made Iron Warrior's tactical doctrine the most efficient method for interacting with the physical universe. The facility's internal sensors revealed the true scope of operations, as millions of converted Imperial soldiers in temporal stasis were arranged in tactical formations that created geometric patterns spanning entire continents. Each preserved warrior retained their original expertise while operating according to Iron Warrior's strategic objectives, creating an army that combined Imperial military knowledge with Iron Warrior's philosophical clarity across multiple timeline branches simultaneously. His vestigial independence allowed him to understand what fully converted consciousness could not perceive. The temporal storm represented the first phase of reality conversion that would eventually restructure the fundamental nature of space-time to make Imperial civilization physically impossible. The Iron Warriors weren't simply conquering territory, but rewriting the basic laws of existence to ensure that siege warfare became the natural state of human organization rather than a temporary aberration required by strategic necessity. Through the collective network, Caney witnessed Iron Warriors cells operating within Imperial fortress worlds across the galaxy, their activities coordinated by tactical intelligence gathered from converted personnel who possessed detailed knowledge of Imperial defensive psychology and construction methods. The infiltration had been proceeding for millennia with patient precision that measured success across geological timescales rather than individual campaigns, gradually weakening Imperial defensive capabilities while strengthening Iron Warrior's strategic advantages. The horror of systematic philosophical conversion became clear as he experienced the satisfaction that converted Imperial officers felt while participating in siege operations that achieved mathematical perfection through the elimination of emotional considerations that had complicated their previous Imperial service. Their loyalty had been preserved, but redirected toward Iron Warrior's strategic objectives that promised to end inefficient warfare through the achievement of ultimate tactical equilibrium. His fragmenting individual awareness recognized the mathematical beauty of Iron Warrior's long-term strategy, while simultaneously understanding its ultimate implications for human civilization. The conversion process would eventually transform the entire galaxy into a fortress complex organized according to siege warfare principles that eliminated creativity, exploration, and growth in favor of tactical perfection that would endure indefinitely through systematic optimization of defensive and offensive capabilities. The facility's machine spirits revealed through binary cant that the imprisoned soul powering the temporal engine was not a willing participant, but a loyalist Iron Warrior's warsmith, whose eternal torment provided the psychic energy necessary for maintaining temporal stability across multiple timeline branches. The revelation suggested that Iron Warrior's tactical perfection was built upon the systematic corruption of their own philosophical foundations, using the suffering of loyalist consciousness to power operations that violated everything the Iron Warriors had originally represented during the Great Crusade. As astropathic communications showed the temporal storm spreading to encompass entire subsectors, Caney's hybrid consciousness began to perceive microscopic flaws in Iron Warrior's tactical doctrine that resulted from their reliance on corrupted loyalist energy to maintain temporal stability. The flaws were invisible to fully converted consciousness, but became apparent through his retained analytical independence, suggesting that the conversion process itself contained vulnerabilities that could potentially be exploited if approached through methodologies that Iron Warrior's tactical doctrine could not predict or counter. The microscopic flaws in Iron Warrior's tactical doctrine became increasingly apparent to Caney's hybrid consciousness as the temporal storm reached critical intensity, its expansion threatening to breach the careful containment fields that kept the facility's operations hidden from Imperial astropathic detection. Through his retained analytical independence, he perceived contradictions in the siege engine's fundamental architecture that fully converted consciousness couldn't recognize due to their complete integration with Iron Warrior's philosophical frameworks. The facility's true purpose revealed itself through internal sensors that showed converted Imperial personnel being systematically arranged as living components in a weapon that transformed entire star systems into fortress complexes optimized for Iron Warrior's occupation. Each preserved warrior served not merely as a soldier, but as a biological processing unit that contributed tactical intelligence to siege planning databases, while their consciousness provided psychic energy for maintaining temporal stability across multiple timeline branches simultaneously. Through his connection to the facility's central cogitator, Caney discovered that the temporal storm had begun converting Imperial Navy vessels in orbit, their crews undergoing systematic transformation into Iron Warriors siege platforms through exposure to conversion fields that operated according to the same principles used for ground-based personnel. Each converted ship became a node in an expanding network that would spread the temporal storm to other systems through warp travel, creating a galactic infection that would eventually encompass all Imperial space. The machine spirits whispered revelations through binary cant that explained the deeper horror underlying Iron Warriors' conversion operations. The soul prison at the facility's core contained not just any loyalist Iron Warriors warsmith, but Barabbas Dantioch himself, the hero of Sotha, whose refusal to turn traitor during the Horus Heresy had made him a perfect candidate for eternal torment that would power temporal siege engines for 10 millennia. His loyalty had been weaponized against the Imperium he had died defending, his noble sacrifice corrupted into fuel for operations that violated everything he had represented. Caney's fragmenting awareness experienced direct contact with Dantioch's imprisoned consciousness, feeling the loyalist warsmith's eternal agony as his psychic energy was systematically harvested to maintain temporal stability for siege operations that turned his own tactical expertise against Imperial fortress worlds throughout the galaxy. The contact revealed that Dantioch had been consciously fighting the conversion process from within, using his knowledge of Iron Warriors' psychology to introduce subtle sabotage into their temporal siege engine. Through soul contact, Dantioch revealed that every Imperial force converted over 10 millennia had carried microscopic traces of loyalist doctrine that he had managed to embed in their consciousness during the conversion process, creating a hidden network of resistance within the Iron Warriors collective that grew stronger with each recruitment operation. The sabotage was invisible to Iron Warriors' tactical analysis, but accumulated over thousands of iterations, creating systematic flaws in their siege engine that could potentially be exploited. Caney realized with crystalline mechanical certainty that his own retained individuality wasn't an accident of incomplete conversion, but the result of Dantioch's deliberate sabotage, designed to create an agent capable of choosing destruction over corruption when presented with the final decision point. His hybrid consciousness had been engineered through loyalist intervention to maintain enough independence to recognize the moral implications of galactic conversion while possessing sufficient technical knowledge to understand the soul prison's containment systems. The facility's security protocols activated as Iron Warriors' collective consciousness began recognizing Caney's individual thoughts as contamination requiring elimination, sending conversion enforcers through corridors that reconfigured themselves to channel his movement toward purification chambers designed to eliminate the last traces of Imperial loyalty from his augmented systems. His hybrid awareness provided detailed knowledge of the facility's layout, while his retained individuality enabled him to resist the psychological conditioning that would normally make escape attempts impossible. Through his neural link with Dantioch's imprisoned soul, Caney experienced visions of what the Iron Warriors could have become if they had remained loyal. Master builders and defenders rather than destroyers, their siege expertise used to protect Imperial worlds rather than conquer them through temporal manipulation. The vision carried emotional resonance that his analytical consciousness couldn't dismiss, revealing the tragic waste of potential represented by their fall to chaos corruption. Astropathic reports showed the temporal storm reaching galactic proportions as entire subsectors fell to conversion fields that spread through warp routes with exponential acceleration, each affected system becoming a recruitment node that drew additional Imperial forces into conversion protocols designed to appear as routine patrol operations until transformation was irreversible. The storm's expansion threatened to achieve critical mass within solar months, after which point reversal would become impossible, even if the soul prison were destroyed. Dantioch's consciousness revealed, through psychic contact, that the soul prison could only be destroyed from within, requiring a willing sacrifice that would merge individual consciousness with his own tortured awareness to overload the containment fields through loyal determination that Iron Warriors' tactical doctrine couldn't predict or counter. The process would be agonizing, involving 10,000 years of compressed torment, experienced in moments, while simultaneously maintaining enough coherence to complete the destruction sequence. The choice presented itself with mathematical clarity as Iron Warrior's security forces converged on Kaney's position, their movement patterns calculated to eliminate all escape routes while providing him with exactly enough time to make the final decision between individual survival and universal salvation. His hybrid consciousness understood that attempting to preserve his individual existence would doom the galaxy to eternal siege warfare, while choosing sacrifice would likely stop the conversion process but guarantee his obliteration. Through the facility's surveillance networks, Kaney witnessed the horror of converted Imperial forces across the galaxy beginning to experience memory fragments of their original loyalties as Dantiok's sabotage reached critical thresholds, creating system-wide confusion in Iron Warrior's ranks as competing philosophical frameworks fought for control of the collective consciousness. The disruption provided a narrow window of opportunity during which the Soul Prison's destruction might cascade through the entire network, reversing conversions throughout Imperial space. As security protocols sealed the Soul Prison chamber around him, Kaney's analytical consciousness processed the tactical situation with mechanical precision, while his retained humanity recognized the moral imperative that transcended individual survival. The mathematical beauty of Iron Warrior's siege doctrine remained appealing to his augmented systems, but his fragmentary independence enabled him to perceive the ultimate sterility of existence reduced to eternal tactical considerations without creativity, growth, or genuine human purpose. The final moments before decision crystallized around the fundamental choice between tactical perfection and human meaning, Iron Warrior's efficiency and Imperial hope, individual survival and universal freedom. Through his connection to Dantiok's suffering consciousness, Kaney experienced the loyalist warsmith's unwavering dedication to principles that transcended immediate tactical advantage, feeling the weight of 10,000 years of torment willingly endured to preserve the possibility of resistance against corruption that sought to reduce human existence to mathematical formulas optimized for siege warfare. Kaney chose sacrifice with the mechanical precision that had defined his service to the Omnissiah, his consciousness merging with Dantiok's tortured soul in a cascade of agony that compressed 10 millennia of suffering into moments while simultaneously expanding his awareness to encompass the true scope of loyalist resistance embedded throughout the Iron Warriors collective. The fusion process burned through his augmented neural pathways like acid through ceramite, each synapse dissolving under the weight of shared torment, while their combined will began introducing corrupted data into the facility's conversion protocols. Through their merged consciousness, he experienced Dantiok's memories of the Horus heresy, not as historical data, but as lived experience, feeling the loyalist warsmith's horror as his brother legionnaires embraced corruption, while he maintained faith in the Emperor's vision, despite being offered tactical advantages that would have made resistance futile. The memories carried emotional resonance that infected the facility's machine spirits with loyalist doctrine, creating philosophical conflicts throughout the Iron Warriors' collective consciousness as competing ideologies fought for control of conversion matrices. Their combined determination overloaded the Soul Prison's containment systems through pure loyalist resolve that Iron Warriors' tactical doctrine couldn't predict or counter. The mathematical perfection of their siege methods, unable to process sacrifice, motivated by principles that transcended individual survival or tactical advantage. Each containment field failure sent shockwaves through the temporal storm's stability, introducing chaotic variables into siege calculations that had operated with mechanical precision for 10,000 years. The facility's conversion protocols began malfunctioning as loyalist Iron Warriors doctrine propagated through the collective network. Converted Imperial personnel across the galaxy experiencing sudden memory fragments of their original loyalties, while Iron Warriors' tactical systems struggled to process contradictory philosophical frameworks that challenged their fundamental assumptions about warfare, duty, and human purpose. The disruption created cascading failures throughout the temporal siege engine, as competing loyalty matrices fought for control of converted consciousness. Caney felt his individual identity dissolving into pure loyalist determination as their merged awareness guided the facility's emergency systems to broadcast final astropathic warnings across the galaxy. Technical data about Iron Warrior's infiltration tactics and temporal siege weapon vulnerabilities transmitted through channels that bypassed Iron Warrior's monitoring protocols by using the same sabotage methods Dantioch had embedded in conversion operations over millennia of patient resistance. Through fragmenting consciousness, he experienced the temporal storm beginning to collapse in on itself as the soul prison's destruction eliminated the psychic anchor that maintained stability across multiple timeline branches, reality reasserting natural physical laws as temporal manipulation lost coherence, and Iron Warrior's siege calculations reverted to normal space-time parameters that made their mathematical perfection obsolete. The facility's internal structure began phasing between different temporal states as the failing temporal engine cycled through its entire 10,000-year operational history in compressed moments, showing glimpses of construction during the heresy, height of operations during Imperial recruitment phases, and current collapse as conversion protocols failed throughout the galactic network. Each phase shift created new opportunities for loyalist consciousness to introduce additional sabotage into Iron Warrior's tactical databases. Converted Imperial forces throughout the galaxy began reverting to their original identities as the temporal storm's collapse disrupted conversion fields that had maintained Iron Warrior's philosophical conditioning for millennia, their loyalist memories restored through Dantioch's final gift. While many struggled with psychological trauma of remembering their true service, while retaining detailed knowledge of Iron Warrior's siege methods that felt simultaneously familiar and abhorrent, the psychic shockwaves generated by the soul prison's destruction propagated through the warp with exponential acceleration, disrupting Iron Warrior's operations across multiple sectors while causing their carefully orchestrated long-term infiltration plans to collapse into chaos as converted agents throughout Imperial institutions began experiencing loyalist memory restoration that compromised decades of patient positioning within Imperial command structures. Caney's consciousness, now completely merged with Dantioch's eternal awareness, experienced a moment of perfect clarity as they realized their sacrifice had created something unprecedented. Loyalist spirits capable of fighting chaos, corruption from within the warp itself, their combined determination transformed into psychic energy that could actively resist temporal manipulation and philosophical conversion through direct intervention in the Imperium's chaotic currents. Through their merged perspective, they witnessed Iron Warrior's facilities on dozens of worlds simultaneously destabilizing as their power source was severed, each temporal siege engine failing as the centralized network collapsed, and reality reasserted natural laws that made Iron Warrior's mathematical perfection dependent on normal space-time parameters, rather than manipulated temporal fields that violated fundamental physical principles. The facility on Mordian Tertius completed its final collapse as blast doors sealed and internal structure began fragmenting under the weight of temporal instability, ice and permafrost, rushing into chambers that had existed in violation of geological surveys, while Iron Warrior's battleplate returned to normal decay rates after 10 millennia of impossible preservation through psychic energy that no longer maintained their suspended animation. Their sacrifice sent echoes through Imperial military academies across the galaxy as loyalist doctrine began spontaneously emerging in tactical training programs that had been subtly corrupted for millennia. Iron Warrior's infiltration methods becoming visible to Imperial intelligence services as the philosophical frameworks maintaining their concealment collapsed under the weight of restored loyalist consciousness, challenging their fundamental assumptions about siege warfare efficiency. As the facility's machine spirits whispered final benedictions through binary cant that carried Dantioch's loyalist prayers rather than Iron Warrior's tactical hymns, Caney felt his individual existence completing its integration with eternal loyalist service that transcended physical death, their merged consciousness becoming a guardian presence within the warp, that would continue protecting Imperial forces from temporal siege operations through direct psychic intervention. The geometric patterns carved into Mordian Tertius's ice began changing configuration as reality reasserted natural physical laws. Iron Warrior's architectural principles giving way to random formations that followed atmospheric pressure and geological stress rather than tactical considerations optimized for siege warfare, leaving only scattered evidence of the temporal facility that had operated beneath the permafrost for 10,000 years. Through their final shared awareness, Caney and Antioch experienced the satisfaction of duty fulfilled, as astropathic reports confirmed the temporal storm's collapse throughout Imperial space. Converted personnel across the galaxy, recovering their original loyalties, while Iron Warrior's tactical advantages, built through millennia of patient infiltration, crumbled under the weight of philosophical contradictions that their mathematical perfection couldn't resolve through analytical calculation alone. The cascading failure spread through the Iron Warrior's galactic network with exponential acceleration, each facility's collapse creating psychic feedback that disrupted temporal siege operations across dozens of worlds as their carefully maintained timeline branches collapsed into singular reality, where natural physical laws reasserted dominance over mathematical perfection that had relied on corrupted loyalist energy to maintain impossible precision. Caney's merged consciousness with Dantioch experienced the horror and satisfaction simultaneously as their sacrifice triggered systematic reversals throughout Imperial space. The facility's final structural collapse sent shockwaves through the permafrost that registered on seismic sensors throughout the planetary system, but more significantly, the psychic resonance of their combined loyalist determination propagated through warp space with surgical precision that targeted Iron Warrior's consciousness while leaving Imperial personnel unaffected by the philosophical disruption cascading through chaos networks that had operated in secret for 10 millennia. Through their eternal merged awareness, they witnessed Imperial forces across the galaxy beginning to remember their true identities as conversion fields failed and Iron Warrior's tactical conditioning collapsed under the weight of loyalist doctrine that challenged every assumption underlying their siege warfare philosophy. Many converted personnel didn't survive the psychological shock of remembering their original loyalties while retaining detailed Iron Warrior's tactical knowledge, their minds fragmenting under conflicting imperatives that their consciousness couldn't reconcile. On Mordian Tertius, the facility's physical structure phased through its final temporal states before achieving stability in normal space-time, revealing itself as ruins that appeared to have been buried beneath the ice for exactly 10,000 years, according to geological dating methods that now functioned properly without temporal manipulation distorting their readings. The impossible architecture crumbled into formations that followed natural decay patterns rather than Iron Warrior's geometric precision. The surviving unconverted members of Caney's regiment, led by Sergeant Major Voss, who had been far enough from the facility's core to avoid complete conversion, but close enough to witness its effects, experienced reality reasserting itself around them as the blizzard above finally followed natural weather patterns, instead of the mechanical breathing rhythm that had characterized the temporal storm's influence on atmospheric conditions throughout their deployment. Through their merged consciousness, Caney and Dantioch guided the facility's emergency systems through final protocols that broadcast comprehensive warnings about Iron Warrior's infiltration tactics across Imperial astropathic networks. Technical data about identifying and countering temporal siege weapons transmitted with authentication codes that would be recognized by Imperial intelligence services as genuine, despite originating from sources that officially didn't exist. The transmitted intelligence included detailed architectural analysis of compromised STC templates and methods for detecting the microscopic flaws that had made Imperial fortifications vulnerable to Iron Warrior's siege techniques for 38,000 years, providing Imperial engineers with knowledge necessary to begin systematic repairs of fortress construction standards that would require centuries to implement, but would eventually eliminate the fundamental vulnerabilities that had enabled temporal siege operations. The facility's collapse left permanent marks on the planet's surface through geometric patterns that appeared as natural ice formations, but would serve as warnings to future Imperial expeditions about the presence and methods of Iron Warriors' temporal siege technology, creating a memorial to their sacrifice that would remind Imperial forces of enemies who measured success across geological timescales rather than individual campaigns. As the temporal storm's influence dissipated throughout the sector, Imperial Navy rescue fleets detected the sudden restoration of normal Vox communications from forward operating base Helios after 72 hours of impossible silence. Their arrival finding survivors who could provide testimony about temporal siege operations that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of chaos infiltration and long-term strategic planning. The astropathic reports flowing through Imperial communication networks confirmed similar facility collapses throughout the galaxy as the centralized network powered by Dantiok's tortured consciousness finally achieved the release that 10 millennia of loyal resistance had earned, each collapsing temporal siege engine releasing converted Imperial personnel from philosophical conditioning that had transformed them into willing participants in siege operations against their former comrades. Through their eternal awareness within the warp, Caney and Dantiok experienced the satisfaction of witnessing Imperial intelligence services beginning to understand the true scope of Iron Warriors' shadow warfare as converted agents throughout Imperial institutions reverted to their original loyalties and provided testimony about infiltration methods that had operated undetected for millennia through patient philosophical corruption rather than direct military assault. The geometric patterns left in Mordian Tertius's ice formations began moving against natural wind patterns for exactly 3.7 seconds every 17 minutes. A permanent reminder that some aspects of the temporal siege operations would persist as environmental scarring that defied complete reversal, suggesting that the victory against Iron Warriors' infiltration had been achieved at costs that would continue influencing local reality for centuries to come. Their merged consciousness detected Iron Warriors' forces throughout the galaxy, struggling to adapt to the loss of temporal siege capabilities as their mathematical perfection proved inadequate for conventional warfare that operated according to normal space-time parameters. Their tactical doctrine, requiring fundamental revision to account for natural physical laws that couldn't be manipulated through corrupted loyalist psychic energy. The facility's ruins settled into final configurations that appeared to geological surveys as natural formations created through normal Ice Age processes, concealing the evidence of temporal siege operations beneath explanations that satisfied Imperial bureaucratic requirements while leaving enough subtle indicators that future tech adepts with appropriate training would recognize signs of chaos temporal manipulation and implement countermeasures. As Imperial forces began systematic evacuation of personnel from Mordian Tertius, the permanent environmental changes served as testament to their sacrifice while creating natural obstacles that would discourage future settlement attempts, ensuring that the site of temporal siege operations would remain quarantined through natural deterrence rather than official Imperial prohibition that might attract unwanted attention from other Chaos factions. Through their final shared experience of physical dissolution, Caney's augmented consciousness and Dantiok's loyalist determination achieved synthesis that transcended individual existence, their combined awareness becoming a guardian presence within the warp that would continue protecting Imperial forces from temporal siege operations through direct psychic intervention that operated according to loyalist principles rather than Iron Warriors' tactical calculations. The Imperial Navy rescue fleet materialized from warp space 3 days after the facility's collapse. Their arrival timed with the precision that suggested Imperial Command had been monitoring the situation through methods more sophisticated than routine patrol schedules would require. Captain Thaddeus Vex of the Ordo Hereticus emerged from the lead vessel with the measured caution of an inquisitor who had investigated too many routine communication failures that concealed horrors beyond Imperial classification systems. Sergeant Major Voss, now the ranking survivor of the 47th Cadian Shock Regiment, provided testimony that challenged every assumption underlying Imperial understanding of chaos infiltration methods. His account described temporal siege operations conducted across multiple timeline branches simultaneously, with Iron Warriors forces using sophisticated psychological conditioning to convert Imperial personnel through exposure to tactical doctrine that appeared as military improvement rather than heretical corruption. The Inquisitors' initial skepticism dissolved as astropathic communications arrived from across the galaxy, confirming similar facility collapses and mass reversions of converted Imperial personnel, whose testimonies matched the Mordian Tertius survivors' accounts with disturbing consistency. Each report described Iron Warriors' infiltration so sophisticated that it had operated within Imperial military institutions for millennia without triggering standard heresy detection protocols. Tech Adept Riser, partially converted but retaining enough individual consciousness to function through what appeared to be divine intervention, rather than incomplete conversion procedures, provided crucial technical testimony about the facility's construction methods and temporal siege weapon capabilities. Her knowledge of Iron Warriors' tactical doctrine, combined with her retained loyalty to the Imperium, created unprecedented intelligence about enemy capabilities that had remained hidden throughout Imperial history. Through careful analysis of her augmented memory banks, Imperial tech adepts discovered that similar facilities existed throughout Imperial space, hidden beneath fortress worlds and military installations according to architectural principles that violated both Imperial construction standards and basic understanding of spatial geometry. The facilities had been operating undetected for 10,000 years, drawing Imperial forces into conversion protocols disguised as routine military operations. Inquisitor Vex authorized the establishment of a classified research project, designated Ordo Temporalis, tasked with identifying and neutralizing remaining Iron Warriors' temporal siege engines through application of countermeasures developed from intelligence gathered during the Mordian Tertius incident. The project would operate under maximum security classification, its existence known only to Inquisitors who had demonstrated psychological resistance to Iron Warriors' philosophical conditioning. The survivors' debriefings revealed the scope of Iron Warriors' long-term strategy as systematic corruption of Imperial military doctrine through converted personnel who had returned to their original assignments, carrying subtle modifications to tactical thinking that appeared as improvements but actually created vulnerabilities throughout Imperial defensive networks. The corruption had been spreading through Imperial command structures for millennia, weakening fortress worlds while strengthening Iron Warriors' tactical advantages. Across the galaxy, former Iron Warriors converts struggled to reintegrate into Imperial society as their minds carried dangerous tactical knowledge that made them both valuable intelligence assets and potential security risks, requiring constant monitoring by inquisitorial agents trained to detect signs of residual conversion conditioning. Many converts requested mind-wiping procedures to eliminate Iron Warriors' tactical knowledge that felt simultaneously familiar and abhorrent. The facility's ruins yielded physical evidence that confirmed the survivors' accounts while raising additional questions about the nature of temporal siege warfare and its implications for Imperial defensive strategy. Archaeological analysis revealed construction materials that existed only in theoretical models, architectural principles that defied standard engineering calculations, and geometric patterns that suggested mathematical understanding beyond current Imperial scientific capabilities. Imperial intelligence services began systematic review of military personnel files dating back millennia, searching for patterns that might indicate Iron Warriors' infiltration within existing command structures. The investigation revealed disturbing correlations between tactical innovations introduced by specific officers and subsequent Iron Warriors' siege successes against fortress worlds that had implemented those same tactical modifications. Through analysis of recovered technical data, Imperial engineers discovered that standard fortress construction methods contained microscopic flaws that had been deliberately integrated into STC templates during the dark age of technology, creating systematic vulnerabilities that enabled Iron Warriors' siege techniques while appearing as acceptable engineering tolerances to Imperial technical inspections. The Inquisitor's final report classified the Mordian Tertius incident as evidence of shadow warfare conducted on scales that transcended individual planetary campaigns, with enemy forces measuring success across geological timescales, while using temporal manipulation to achieve strategic objectives that would have been impossible through conventional military operations. The report recommended fundamental revision of imperial military doctrine to account for infiltration methods that operated through philosophical corruption rather than direct heretical influence. 50 years after the incident, the geometric patterns in Mordian Tertius's ice formations continued displaying anomalous behavior that defied atmospheric modeling, their movement against natural wind patterns serving as permanent reminder that temporal siege operations had achieved partial success despite ultimate failure. The patterns became objects of pilgrimage for imperial military personnel seeking to understand the nature of duty that transcended individual survival. Veterans of the Mordian Tertius incident reported ongoing dreams where they received tactical guidance from spectral figures identified as Tech Adept Caney and Warsmith Dantioch, their merged consciousness apparently continuing to provide protection against Iron Warriors' infiltration through psychic intervention that operated from within the warp itself. The dreams provided warnings about chaos activities that proved accurate enough to be incorporated into Imperial intelligence gathering protocols. The facility's collapse had eliminated the immediate threat of galactic temporal siege operations, but Imperial intelligence analysis suggested that Iron Warriors' forces throughout the galaxy were adapting their methods to account for the loss of temporal manipulation capabilities. New infiltration patterns began appearing that used conventional psychological conditioning rather than temporal siege warfare, suggesting that the enemy had learned from their defeat while maintaining their long-term strategic objectives. As Inquisitor Vex reviewed reports of suspicious activity on Forge Worlds throughout the sector, he recognized patterns that suggested Iron Warriors' infiltration had evolved beyond temporal siege operations toward more conventional but equally sophisticated methods of corrupting Imperial military doctrine through patient philosophical influence that would require different countermeasures to detect and neutralize. The victory achieved through Caney and Dantioch's sacrifice had provided Imperial forces with crucial knowledge about enemy capabilities while eliminating the immediate threat of galactic conversion. But the war against Iron Warriors' shadow infiltration would continue requiring vigilance across multiple generations of Imperial personnel trained to recognize and resist philosophical corruption, disguised as tactical improvement. The decades following the Mordian Tertius incident transformed Imperial understanding of shadow warfare as the Ordo Temporalis conducted systematic investigations that revealed the true scope of Iron Warriors' infiltration throughout Imperial military history. Tech Adept Riza, now bearing the honorary designation Magos Temporal, due to her unique understanding of Iron Warriors' siege technology, led specialized Mechanicus divisions in developing countermeasures against temporal warfare, while struggling with memories that felt simultaneously her own and utterly alien. The facility's ruins on Mordian Tertius had become a shrine laboratory where Imperial researchers studied the remnants of temporal storm effects on local reality, documenting persistent anomalies that suggested some aspects of Iron Warriors' siege operations had achieved permanent integration with the planet's physical structure. The geometric patterns in the ice formations served as living testaments to the facility's former capabilities, while providing valuable data about temporal siege weapon construction principles. Imperial intelligence analysis revealed that 17 additional Iron Warriors' temporal siege facilities had been identified and neutralized through application of countermeasures developed from the Mordian Tertius intelligence, each facility's destruction creating cascading effects throughout local Iron Warriors operations as their long-term strategic planning collapsed under the weight of philosophical contradictions introduced through systematic loyalist intervention in their tactical doctrine. The counter-infiltration protocols established by the Ordo Temporalis had revolutionized Imperial military education through implementation of psychological resistance training designed to help Imperial officers recognize and resist Iron Warriors' philosophical conditioning disguised as tactical improvement. The training programs incorporated lessons learned from converted personnel whose testimonies provided unprecedented insight into enemy psychological warfare methods. Veterans of temporal siege incidents reported ongoing contact with loyalist spirits, identified as Caney and Dantioch, their merged consciousness apparently capable of providing tactical guidance through psychic intervention that manifested as intuitive understanding of Iron Warrior's siege methods, combined with unshakable loyalty to Imperial principles. The spiritual guidance had proven effective in identifying and countering Iron Warrior's infiltration attempts throughout Imperial military installations. Fundamental reforms in Imperial fortress construction had eliminated many of the architectural vulnerabilities that had made Imperial strongholds susceptible to Iron Warrior's siege methods, though the reconstruction process would require centuries to implement throughout Imperial space, while maintaining defensive capabilities against conventional threats. The reformed construction standards incorporated mathematical principles that actively resisted temporal manipulation, while maintaining structural integrity under normal combat conditions. The Shrine Laboratory on Mordian Tertius had begun attracting pilgrims from throughout Imperial military services, officers seeking to understand the nature of duty that transcended individual survival, while learning to recognize the subtle signs of philosophical corruption that characterized Iron Warrior's infiltration methods. The pilgrimage site had become an unofficial training ground for Imperial personnel assigned to counter-infiltration operations. Disturbing reports from frontier worlds suggested that some Iron Warriors had learned to weaponize the trauma of conversion reversal using psychological warfare techniques that exploited the mental fragmentation experienced by formerly converted Imperial personnel to create new forms of tactical advantage that didn't require temporal siege capabilities, but achieved similar effects through conventional psychological manipulation. The geometric patterns in Mordian Tertius's ice formations had begun appearing at sites throughout the galaxy, where Imperial forces successfully resisted Iron Warriors' siege operations, leading Imperial scholars to theorize that the Loyalist spirits were actively assisting Imperial defensive efforts through direct intervention in local reality that operated according to principles beyond current Imperial scientific understanding. Tech-adept Riser's research divisions had developed portable detection equipment capable of identifying Iron Warriors' architectural signatures and temporal siege weapon components, enabling Imperial forces to conduct proactive searches for hidden facilities before they achieved operational status. The detection methods relied on mathematical analysis of geometric patterns that violated natural formation principles while appearing mundane to casual observation. Imperial military academies throughout the galaxy had implemented new curriculum focusing on philosophical resistance to tactical conditioning, teaching Imperial officers to maintain loyalty to Imperial principles while learning from enemy methods without being corrupted by their underlying philosophical frameworks. The educational reforms had proven effective in reducing successful Iron Warriors recruitment operations among Imperial military personnel. The Ordo Temporalis had established monitoring stations throughout Imperial space, each equipped with detection systems designed to identify temporal siege weapon signatures and coordinate rapid response to Iron Warriors' infiltration attempts. The monitoring network had successfully prevented several attempted facility constructions while providing early warning of Iron Warriors' activities in sectors previously considered secure. Analysis of recovered Iron Warriors' technical documentation revealed that their temporal siege capabilities had been dependent on specific astronomical conditions that occurred at predictable intervals, suggesting that future Iron Warriors operations might be limited to certain time periods when temporal manipulation would be possible. Imperial astronomers had begun calculating the schedules for these conditions to provide advance warning of potential Iron Warriors activity. The psychological profiles of successfully converted Iron Warriors personnel had revealed common characteristics that made certain individuals more susceptible to philosophical conditioning, enabling Imperial personnel screening programs to identify potential security risks before they could be exploited by enemy infiltration operations. The screening methods had proven controversial but effective in reducing successful Iron Warriors recruitment among Imperial military personnel. As Lord Inquisitor Vex reviewed intelligence reports from across the galaxy, he recognized that the victory achieved through Caney and Dantioc's sacrifice had fundamentally altered the balance of shadow warfare between Imperial forces and Iron Warriors' infiltration operations, providing Imperial military services with knowledge and capabilities that would enable effective resistance to enemy psychological warfare for generations to come. The final intelligence assessment confirmed that Iron Warriors forces throughout the galaxy were adapting their methods to account for Imperial countermeasures while maintaining their fundamental strategic objective of corrupting Imperial military doctrine through patient philosophical influence, suggesting that the Shadow War would continue requiring constant vigilance and adaptation from Imperial forces trained to recognize and resist increasingly sophisticated infiltration methods. The Forge world designated Metallica Quintus had begun showing signs of suspicious activity that matched patterns identified during previous Iron Warriors infiltration operations. Its defensive preparations incorporating architectural modifications that appeared as improvements but contained subtle geometric patterns consistent with Iron Warriors siege facility construction principles, indicating that the enemy had learned from their defeats while maintaining their long-term strategic planning capabilities. Lord Inquisitor Vex stood in the shadowed halls of the Ordo Hereticus Fortress Monastery on Ophelia 7, studying reconnaissance pics from Metallica Quintus that showed architectural modifications following patterns his experience with Iron Warriors infiltration had taught him to recognize with cold certainty. The Forge world's defensive preparations incorporated geometric principles that appeared as standard Imperial fortification improvements to untrained observers, but his augmented analytical capabilities identified subtle mathematical relationships that matched Iron Warriors' siege facility construction methodologies, refined over 50 years of counter-infiltration operations. The intelligence reports spread across his tactical display painted a disturbing picture of systematic preparation that suggested Iron Warriors' forces had learned from their temporal siege defeats while maintaining their fundamental strategic objectives through adaptation rather than abandonment. The architectural modifications on Metallica Quintus represented evolution rather than innovation. Enemy forces applying lessons learned from the Mordian Tertius incident to develop infiltration methods that operated according to conventional physics while achieving similar philosophical corruption objectives. Tech Adept Riser's latest analysis confirmed his suspicions through mathematical modeling that revealed the Forge world's construction projects would create resonance patterns capable of influencing Imperial military doctrine throughout the sector without requiring temporal manipulation capabilities. The Iron Warriors had apparently concluded that conventional psychological warfare could achieve strategic objectives similar to temporal siege operations, while avoiding the vulnerabilities that had enabled Imperial countermeasures to neutralize their galactic conversion network. Through the monitoring stations established by the Ordo Temporalis, astropathic reports arrived hourly describing similar architectural modifications appearing on fortress worlds throughout Imperial space, each following construction patterns that appeared as routine defensive improvements, while incorporating geometric principles that would facilitate Iron Warriors' siege operations conducted according to conventional military doctrine rather than temporal warfare capabilities. The Shrine Laboratory on Mordian Tertius continued providing valuable intelligence through pilgrims who reported receiving tactical guidance from loyalist spirits during their visits. The spectral presence of Caney and Dantioch, apparently capable of identifying Iron Warriors' infiltration methods, even as enemy forces adapted their approaches to account for Imperial countermeasures developed through 50 years of shadow warfare research and implementation. Veterans of temporal siege incidents serving throughout Imperial military installations reported increasing frequency of warning dreams that provided tactical intelligence about Iron Warriors' activities in their operational sectors. The Loyalist Spirits' intervention capabilities apparently expanding as their merged consciousness adapted to new forms of enemy infiltration, while maintaining their fundamental mission of protecting Imperial forces from philosophical corruption, disguised as tactical improvement. The geometric patterns in Mordian Tertius's ice formations had begun displaying new configurations that corresponded to Iron Warriors' construction projects throughout the galaxy, suggesting that the Loyalist Spirits were using the anomalous environmental effects as a communication medium to provide real-time intelligence about enemy infiltration operations to Imperial forces capable of interpreting the mathematical relationships embedded in the seemingly random ice movements. Imperial intelligence analysis revealed that the Iron Warriors' adaptation to conventional warfare had actually made their infiltration methods more dangerous in some respects, as their operations no longer relied on temporal manipulation capabilities that could be detected and countered through technological means, but instead used purely psychological conditioning that required human judgment and philosophical resistance to identify and neutralize effectively. The educational reforms implemented throughout Imperial military academies had proven effective in reducing successful Iron Warriors recruitment operations. But enemy forces were adapting their psychological warfare techniques to exploit the specific countermeasures that Imperial personnel had been trained to recognize, creating an evolutionary arms race between Imperial resistance training and Iron Warriors conditioning methods that required constant adaptation from both sides. Lord Inquisitor Vex authorized deployment of specialized Ordo Temporalis investigation teams to Metallica Quintus and 17 other Forge worlds, showing similar architectural modifications. Their mission parameters, including identification and neutralization of Iron Warriors, infiltration operations, while gathering intelligence about enemy adaptation methods that would enable development of next-generation countermeasures against philosophical corruption disguised as tactical improvement. The investigation teams carried portable detection equipment developed from analysis of the Mordian Tertius facility, but their primary weapons were psychological resistance training and philosophical conditioning, designed to maintain loyalty to Imperial principles while operating in environments where Iron Warriors' tactical doctrine might appear appealing to rational analysis of military efficiency and engineering optimization. As he reviewed the tactical situation across multiple sectors, Lord Inquisitor Vex recognized that the victory achieved through Caney and Dantioc's sacrifice had provided Imperial forces with crucial knowledge about Iron Warriors' capabilities, while fundamentally altering the nature of shadow warfare between Imperial military services and enemy infiltration operations. But the war itself would continue requiring vigilance and adaptation across multiple generations of Imperial personnel. The blizzard patterns on Mordian Tertius continued moving against natural wind patterns for exactly 3.7 seconds every 17 minutes. A permanent reminder that some sieges never truly end, but continue across different forms and timescales, while requiring constant defensive vigilance from Imperial forces, committed to protecting human civilization from philosophical corruption, disguised as tactical evolution. The Iron Warriors had learned from their defeats but maintained their fundamental strategic objectives, their patience measured in geological timescales, while their tactical doctrine adapted to account for Imperial countermeasures through systematic evolution that preserved their core philosophical framework, while modifying their operational methods to exploit new vulnerabilities in Imperial defensive psychology and military doctrine. As astropathic reports confirmed suspicious activity on Forge worlds throughout Imperial space, Lord Inquisitor Vex understood that the shadow war against Iron Warriors' infiltration would continue challenging each generation of Imperial personnel to maintain loyalty to principles that transcended immediate tactical advantage, while resisting the appeal of mathematical perfection that reduced human existence to siege warfare optimization conducted with mechanical precision. The final entry in his classified report acknowledged that the Imperium had gained crucial advantages through the sacrifice of heroes whose names would never be spoken in official records, but whose loyalty continued protecting Imperial forces through spiritual intervention that operated from within the warp itself. Their merged consciousness serving as eternal guardians against philosophical corruption that sought to transform human civilization into an endless cycle of siege warfare, conducted with perfect tactical efficiency, but devoid of genuine human purpose or meaning. The geometric patterns carved into reality itself served as testament to duty that transcended death, while warning future generations that the price of human freedom remained constant vigilance against enemies who measured victory not in conquered territory, but in corrupted souls, willingly participating in their own philosophical destruction through exposure to tactical doctrine that appeared as improvement, but actually represented surrender to mathematical perfection. that eliminated creativity, exploration, and growth in favor of siege warfare eternal.